morning, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here. Have learned a lot and been inspired by the speakers of the last couple days, and very grateful to throw a few words your way to try to reciprocate with everyone who's contributed to this meeting. And thanks especially to Rob and Joe for their engagement with me and bringing me here and sharing their wonderful ideas and humor with me the last couple days. Agrarian poetry, agrarian prophecies, agrarian urgencies. One might ask whether any 21st century preoccupation with agrarian values and ideals comes as too little, too late, for less than 1 in every 6 Canadian and US citizens lives in rural areas outside towns, cities, and suburbs, and about 1 in 50 call themselves farmers or ranchers. So why bring up the agrarian myth again in any form? But listen up, look again. A new agrarianism is emerging in Western Canada and the Western United States, and it is not restricted to the rural domain. In fact, I put these 3 images up. They're all you're going to see. This is the world's shortest PowerPoint presentation. Because I have a sense that the new agrarianism that I see embodied in some of the elements of that image in the middle may be a cure to the old urbanism of the West and the old agrarianism of the West. Nor does it necessarily stem, this new agrarianism, from some romantic desire to reenact the social behaviors and mores associated with rural populaces of bygone eras. Instead, this new agrarianism is emerging within urban as well as rural communities, among young and old. It may indeed be the set of values and operating principles which can obliterate what Patty Limerick calls the urban-rural divide, which has both characterized and crippled North American cultures for most of the last 50 years. But what exactly does agrarian mean, and why are the concepts associated with this concept being used once more as rallying cries, decades after most North Americans have become disenfranchised from the land, and a half-century after most agrarian populist movements blew away with the winds of change? Well, if we return to its etymological roots, agric can be traced back as far as Proto-Indo-European languages, the term egros, which has cognates not only in Old English but in ancient Greek, Latin, and Sanskrit as well. As used over the centuries in Europe and England, this term refers to a constellation of activities, values, and premises regarding human relationships to cultivated soil and to land in general. As a prefix in Latin and then in Old, Middle, and Modern English, ager or agri relate to soil, fields, farms, land, terrain, landscape, territory, and country. In ever-widening circles and ever-rippling energy fields, we feel that these terms are speaking to how we're engaged with the earth as an ally in bringing ourselves and others our daily bread. In the related term agriculture, based on ager and colere, we see the relationship between humans and land circumscribed by the activities and values of cultivating, tilling, stewarding, tending, and safeguarding. Those are values, not just activities, obviously. But as few North Americans now remember, and I wonder how many Albertans remember, rural residents in Western Canada might consider themselves to live in the center of origin for North America's agrarian, political, and social movements. As Bradford James Rennie has documented, Alberta was the epicenter of the first tidal wave of agrarian thinking in North America, where instead of just a sole philosopher or a short, brief, localized movement, it was something that really spread and spilled over the border into the United States, not the other way. Beginning with Henry Weiss Wood's ascendancy as a galvanizing agrarian leader of populist movements here nearly a century ago, political organizations such as the Society of Equity and United Farmers of Alberta, I'm speaking Spanish here, and the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation gained enough steam to become the precursors of your new Democratic Party in Canada. These constituencies emerged out of the first Back to the Land movement in North America, one in which intellectuals, social critics, journalists, teachers, scholars, and activists became wary of the perils of industrialism and capitalism. They left cities in droves and regrouped as rural-based, intentional communities that were often self-sufficient in their food, fuel, and fiber needs. Between 1914 and 1937, the UFA grew to include 40% of the male-dominated households in this province and spread throughout Canada, electing many members to Parliament. And yet, after World War II, about the time that Henry Weiss Wood himself passed away, his politically motivated constituencies factionalized, fragmented, and faded away. While this movement has largely been dismissed by historians as a short-lived, rather parochial political event, I don't think it was any such thing. In fact, many of its concerns are being re-articulated today. It was and is a philosophical critique of the direction that North American society at large has been drifting. It is claimed that the deteriorations of country life pose problems for the nation as a whole. The deteriorations of country life pose problems for the nation as a whole. Not merely a political party, the United Farmers briefly overlapped with the country life movement, which sought to reverse rural economic decline and the depopulation of the countryside. They also had some philosophical overlap with advocates of Arcadianism in Canada, as well as the Grange and the Southern Agrarians of the United States. Together, they once formed the largest and longest-running agrarian populist movement in North American history, and it began right here. Back in Alberta, Henry Weiss Wood had conceived of farmers and other rural food producers as a distinct social class. It's very interesting phrasing, I think, in light of how we look at class today. Distinct from that of urban capitalists who were, for the most part, placeless and irresponsible in their relationship with those who brought them their daily bread. As Wood argued with much the same fervor recently found in the Occupy Wall Street movement, these untethered urbanites controlled most of the savings and loan firms, most of the banks, most of the long-distance transportation systems, and most transnational grain commodity trade, disproportionately profiting from the sweat, skills, talents, and intelligence of farmers and ranchers, in Wood's opinion. Wood proposed solution was a kind of democratic, communal, economic solidarity or socialist corporatism expressed through rural co-ops which would defend the interests of their particular agrarian occupations in the class struggle against placeless urban capitalist ideologues. But the irony is that Wood began hoping for broader justice and equity in society, and he, as well as others in the movement, I think, made critical mistakes in how they framed the issues of the time. He seldom made alliances with those outside his own class, and when he did, There were perilous and tragic results in some cases. For instance, the Edmonton Hunger March of 1932 pitted the UFA against hungry farmers and city dwellers and looked as though they were on the sides of bankers and businessmen. Their popularity began to erode after that. The violence associated with that Edmonton Hunger March in 1932 was revealed, and that's when the factionalism began to grow. But at the same time, long-term demographic trends were running against wood. For 1 in 3 Canadians lived on farms in 1931, and now it's 1 in 46 today. The same trends transformed the United States. In 1930, 1 in every 5 citizens were farmers, and 44% of the population lived in rural areas. But today, just 1.5% of U.S. citizens are farmers, half of what Wendell Berry quoted in The Unsettling of America, of 4% at the time he wrote that book around 1976 or 1978. And 75% of all fruits and vegetables hand harvested in the United States are picked not by those born in the United States, but by foreign-born farm workers, most of whom make under $15,000 a year for working over 42 to 50 hours a week. So we have really imported a lower working class to the United States to do our dirty work. And now we're debating whether allowing such people to immigrate is even worth it. And because of that, this year in the United States, $7 to $9 billion of fruits and vegetables will go unpicked and either fall on the ground or stay on the tree. It's a remarkable bit of collateral damage done by the immigration debate in the United States. The demographic shift to city life has been seen by many observers to have spelled the end of agrarianism, to make it irrelevant. But in less than a century, North American residents suffered the largest loss of traditional knowledge about food getting and putting up food that has happened in human history. Let me say that again, because I think it's such an obvious fact that we forget it now and then. Within the last 3 generations of some 100,000 generations of our species, we've forgotten or failed to pass on more orally transmitted knowledge about getting food and putting it up than at any point in human history and any place on the planet. So we may not see that as a disability when we can just walk across the street and get 8 kinds of ethnic food in a matter of a couple minutes, but that tremendous loss of how to care for the land, how to bring food to the table, is obviously going to catch up with us. I started raising a heritage breed of sheep about 15 years ago. My grandfather was a sheep herder in Lebanon, and I just thought probably a million times had I only had a chance to talk to him about how to raise sheep as I was deciding to do what to do with stillbirths, or what to do with triplets, or what to do with fungal infections in the feed, or worms, or sheep that stuck their heads between rungs of a fence and couldn't get them out. I thought that I was brutally making it up as I went rather than have any guidance from previous generations. And I could repeat and remind us of stories like that that are happening all around us every day. Well, the irony is that, that at the same time we've been losing this traditional knowledge, the proponents of that kind of knowledge and those kind of values, like Wendell Berry, Helen and Scott Nearing, Ralph Besorti, Louis Bromfield, have been diagnosed or disparaged by urban critics as being afflicted with some nostalgic dysfunction. That was the term used in Washington Post for one of Wendell Berry's books, that has symptoms of being anti-urban, Luddite, or retro. The irony is that, that I don't think the youth of Canada and America are paying much attention to critics like Bentley, who put that criticism on Wendell Berry. Agrarianism has once again flourished, with some proponents such as Eric Freifogel and David Walbert trying to differentiate their philosophies as neo-agrarian. On his website, just newagrarian.com, Walbert offers a brilliant articulation of how the new agrarianism might be distinguished from earlier forms of agrarianism that may have been flawed by romanticism, classism, or naivety. New agrarianism, he says, most importantly, is not about preserving a way of life or recreating the past. It is about building a future. New agrarianism is about creating a new kind of rural community, one that is genuinely rural and food producing, but that is fully part of the 21st century American society. My old friend David Orr offers an even broader definition of new agrarianism. This new agrarianism is no small, whittled down philosophy for rural folks. And remember that every time we use the word folks in the US or Canada, we're almost inevitably using it pejoratively. It is, rather, a full-blown philosophy rooted in the realities of soil and nature as the standard, nature as measure, by which we come to judge everything else. It is grounded in farming, but it is larger still. The logic of agrarianism unfolds like a fractal through the divisions and incoherence of the modern world. Today, thankfully, there's a young agrarian movement here in Canada linked to grassroots alliances such as Farm Folk, City Folk, and other movements in the United States called the Greenhorns and the National Young Farmers Coalition. These groups are trying to correct the flaws of former expressions of agrarianism by welcoming both urban and rural food producers of all races, ethnicities, and classes, and making strong alliances with urban food activists and consumers as well. They are part of a larger and more aggressive slow food, good food, and just food movement that does not privilege rural residents over urban ones, as long as they're all striving for food justice and land health. The activities of these youth groups are inspiring in and of themselves, but they also take inspiration from the great agrarian prophets which preceded them. I'd like to focus on them for a moment. Agrarian poetry, their way of expressing themselves in this context, and I'm talking both about prose writers, poets, and oral performers. This kind of agrarian poetry plays many roles in our society and takes many forms, some of them traditional, like cowboy music, but others quite novel and edgy. They include cowhand recitations, new Western songwriting, sheepherders' ballads, farmers' prayers, and even prose poems, graffiti, and cowboy jazz. Many of these spoken art forms are clearly meant to entertain or humorous, but others can make us howl, weep, or well up with wonder, anger, or awe. But that's not all. Cowboy poetry, farmers' prose poems, and other agrarian literatures also help us remember enduring rural values, skills, and expressions that may still help guide our relationships with changing landscapes rather than being dismissed as obsolete. They can help us restore and thereby restore the land itself with elements continuous with the past that deserve to be held dear in the present moment. In other words, I don't think it's a choice between the past and the present and the future. It's asking for continuity between those three phases. With less than 2% of all citizens in North America identifying themselves as farmers or ranchers, this poetry keeps these values, skills, and expressions alive. And because of that, perhaps it's needed more than ever in North American history. Why? Because we're walking around in this 21st century in some kind of amnesia, as if we can completely break with everything of value in the past to American societies, which were primarily rural. While climate change is advancing, food and water security deteriorating, these issues that unite urban and rural dwellers may trump every other issue facing us in the West. As Margaret Atwood pointedly quipped about coming climatic changes in 2010, okay, you guys, go 3 days without water, and you'll find out that you don't have any human rights. Why? Because you're dead. And so the kinds of issues that this poetry confronts, I think, is something that all of us need to be confronted with, not just those who, quote, enjoy cowboy poetry. And yet there's one function of agrarian poetic traditions that may be now well known and felt among the practitioners, but remains little discussed among society at large and among literary critics in particular. Its visionary and prophetic function. I wish to focus on this particular function of agrarian poetry because I feel that more than ever before, diverse agrarian voices need to be heard for what they are telling us about how to live or how not to live in the future. Without being polemical, poetry can expose the damage that has been done to our watersheds, food sheds, and cultures, and therefore to our communities and to our bodies whenever these relationships get out of sync. This damage is glaringly evident to any storyteller living or working in the Canadian or American West. Where I live in the U.S. Southwest along the Mexican border, those 4 border states around me, U.S. States of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California, have contributed no less than 1/4 of all the ranch land and farmland lost in the U.S. over the last quarter century. Just 4 states out of 50 is where the most land has been converted from food production to urban, rural, and retirement communities. Our ruthless economy has stripped and mauled such lands into submission. What Sun Belt developers call housing developments should truly be called arrested development, because they disallow the opportunities, the unfolding of opportunities and insights that David Orr champions in his definition of agrarianism. We've all witnessed rural places once highly regarded for their abundance of game, their prodigiousness of their herds and livestock, the diversity of their fruits and roots, but now these same places are being designated as food deserts and dead zones by our ministries of agriculture. We've all heard urban planners claim that the highest and best use of water that is now being used to grow food or forage would be to shun it all into cities for more lawns, swimming pools, fountains, golf courses, and shoddy subdivisions disguised as gated communities. Many of us have also heard the hip but cynical urban intellectuals regarding cowboy life or farm life as merely quaint rural throwbacks, and that traditional agriculture is something only to be cherished by romantics who wish to ignore or impede the acceptance of postmodern realities. I would argue that the images, ideas, and values of our best American poets are our culture's antibodies that will help protect us from a host of diseases, social and otherwise, in the future, and that dismissing the preoccupation of agrarian poetry as things of the past is both problematic and perilous. Agrarian poets have arisen in many societies whenever estrangement from the land threatens to undermine the very core of our existence. Listen to the theologian Ellen Davis, who has argued that agrarian poetry and prophecy have historically played essential roles in writing the course of cultures gone astray. Quote, "If the message of new agrarian writers may be rightly called prophetic, the more important fact is less widely recognized. The message of the earliest prophetic writers in the Bible was also distinctly agrarian. The 8th century prophets Amos and Hosea were probably the world's first agrarian writers. This sudden outburst of rural prophecy, apparently unprecedented in the depth and range of its vision and replete with language and images that evoke the experience of farmers, seems to have been prompted by the large-scale transformation of both the land and the rural economy. In essence, agrarian poets and prophets have emerged from farm and ranch country whenever their way of life has been threatened by political, economic, or military forces that have ignored or even broken the covenant between rural communities and the land. It is no wonder that America witnessed a flush of agrarian poets such as Walt Whitman, Henry David Thoreau, Ole Rolvag, and Hamlin Garland as the Industrial Revolution hit the East and Midwest. Later, it produced John Steinbeck, Robinson Jeffers, Robert Service, and H.L. Davis when industrialization reached the West Coast. But we need not look further than our own back doorstep in the windswept West to find the resurgence of agrarian poetry alive and well in North America. The current generation includes Don Gayton of BC, Wally McCrae in Montana, Linda Hasselstrom, South Dakota, Drum Hadley in Arizona, Doug Unger in Nevada, Sharon O'Toole in Wyoming, Vess Quinlan in Colorado, Paul Hunter in Washington, and Brian Smith, Ian Tyson, and Corb Lund here in Alberta. One might ask how we distinguish agrarian poetry from other forms of agrarian philosophy, political activism, and prophetic prose. I would argue that the poet's use of sensuous imagery and compelling narrative, rather than a reliance on didactic rhetoric, is what sets agrarian poets apart from their brethren. They remind us through visual images, sounds, fragrances, and flavors of what we may be in risk of losing and what we need to tenaciously keep dear. As an example of this sensuousness, let us recall the first and last few verses of Wally McCrae's haunting homage to the ghost looming within many obliterated Western landscapes in his poem, Things of Intrinsic Worth. Remember that sand rock on Emmel's Creek where Dad carved his name in 13? It's been blasted down into rubble and interred by their drag line machine. Where the Fadis lived at the old Miller place, where us kids stole melons at night, they dozed it up into a funeral pyre, then torched it. It's gone all right. There's a railroad loop and a coal storage shed where the bison kill site used to be. The Guy place, it's gone. Ambrose's too. Beulah Farley's a ranch refugee. But my God, things are booming here. We've got this new school that's envied across the state. When folks up and ask, how are things going down there? I grin like a fool and say, great, great God, how we're doing. We're rolling in dough as they tear and ravage the earth. And nobody knows or nobody cares about things of intrinsic worth. Of course, some of the poetic prophets have made us realize just how we're losing, not just what we're losing, by confronting the cold-hearted materialism of those who are unsettling the West. And as Don Worcester has made the point, those who are unsettling the West are not just in New York and San Francisco and Washington and Toronto and Montreal these days. They're in the skyscrapers of Calgary, of Denver, of Phoenix, of Las Vegas, and even in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Here's a conversation heard among businessmen whom Drum Hadley, one of my neighbors, overheard in the Palm Court restaurant in New York City, as laid down in his poem, "Our lands are in the belly of the beast." Take them, invite them out to lunch. Don't get attached to those old folks. It's money, it's property, it's real estate, it's just things, you know. Do you want to sell? What do you want to pay me to sell it for you? We made $50 or $60 million that way last year. That farmer, well, he died penniless. His children asked for $1,000 for the funeral. Heck, it was deductible. Of course, we gave it to them. While some of these prophetic poets dwell on what damaged segments of humankind have obviously wrought upon us all, others focus on how one responds to the ways nature itself is changing, with or without human prompting. Consider these excerpts from Linda Hasselstrom's Drought Year with their sense of foreboding. I dreamed I slept alone in a drought year, and now I do. I lie in the short grass. Water is my dream. All day I was fuel for the sun, burning like wildfire over a dry land. I dream that you died in a drought year, and you did. I dream myself a dry woman, and I have become one, the juice gone right out of me. My skin was once fragrant with other fragrances, but now there are prairie odors. I am dying grass, wind-bent, long, tough roots that grapple deep into the baked prairie earth. Leaves die, but roots dream in crumbled sod, waiting for rain. But the drought expressed in the Western North American states and provinces is not merely in the sky or in the topsoil. It is also in the aquifers that we have mined beneath our feet and in the unraveling of rural communities that we have allowed to become fragmented. Listen to my friend, the Texas poet and songwriter Andy Wilkinson, speak of what has happened to the tribe that became too dependent on mining what he calls the mother lode aquifer, the Ogallala. Humbling enough is the waste of our own making. Here, where we once believed that rain followed the plow, believed boosters, promoters, and huckster developers, hitched up our wagons to 40 small acres, plowed fence row to fence row with cash crops on banknotes, built churches, raised children, and sent them to colleges, sent them to wars, sent them out of the hinterlands, sent them to places that never relinquished them. Here, from the land of the Mother Lode Aquifer, people are leaving for jobs in the popular cities, are leaving as victims of bottom-line corporate discounters, driving off businesses started by yours and my mom-and-pop grandparents, corporate farmers replacing the families, swashbucklers slashing and cutting, efficiency chanted as mantra, while nobody's answering who will take care of the Mother Lode Aquifer. That's because fear lines our pocketbooks. Fear comes in 1/4-inch 4x4 plywood sheets nailed over window panes. Fear grows in the weeds and the sidewalks of vacancies. Fear breeds the desperate bargaining. Jobs, bring us jobs, just bring us jobs, bring us jobs, bring us anything. Bring us the worst of your wastes and your prisoners, radioactive and toxic, the detritus, social and otherwise, flush from the gutter pipes laid from the centers of power and influence, aimed at the weak, aimed at the people of choicelessness, stumbling around in the wastes not of their own making, wastes that will poison the Mother Lode Aquifer. Responding to another omen, Russ Libby's pledge was written when he saw this headline: "Now the Pentagon tells Bush climate change will destroy us," just as he himself was diagnosed with cancer. If this is true, that climate change will destroy us, that the world we have known will not be, that ice and storms from the north will be matched by dry wind from the south and the west. Where else to be but here? We could move with the many, but that only concentrates the problems to come. Dug in there, oops, I've skipped a page, excuse me. And the mysteries, the questions. I'm curious about what might still grow here. The russet from the bean road should fruit soon. Sheep still make sense for a while. For now, chickens too. The energy of seeds, they're sharing. Vikings ate elemus, the wild perennial ryegrass, for grain. Can we too? If the world we know is about to crumble, the world we create can only start right here where we are. My last breath will still carry hope for the future and a love for the present and for you, though many dark days may come to pass. Perhaps because of the constant challenges faced by farmers and ranchers merely trying to maintain their hold on some land, their poets are exceedingly willing to joyously express their gratitude when a windfall comes their way. In Where Hope Springs, Paul Hunter describes the fortuitous moment when, below the barn in the pasture, Edwin, one day, deep in the worst of the depression, found a small, soft, swampy spot where water seeped out of the ground. Dug in there for the catchment, formed up and poured cement, framed in and lidded a pump house, commenced to watering livestock 75 years ago or more. No matter what else became of the herds, the crops, still, in every dry spell, that spring ran clean like a cloudburst, spilling sweet water aplenty. Hope never once has run dry. I'd like to lead you with my own ode of hope in this new normal, this moment of uncertainty in the American West. And it's called Sowing Circle, not as sewing a piece of cloth, but in the sowing of seeds, of casting seeds. We sow these words like seeds to the wind, hoping they will find the earth they need to endure the drought and bear the fruit for us to eat in a future now more unfathomable than ever. After dawn, we moved stone next to stone to terrace a slope with the lingering hope of keeping just a little of the earth in place, even when everything around us seems to be raging loose. Such measly gestures done with rough hands, burning minds, pumped up hearts, cannot forestall any flood, any drought. But you tell me, just how will sitting on our asses ever keep us rooted or even fed in the face of all this uncertainty? In weaving such images into agrarian prophecies, Western poets and poet farmers somehow transform the bitterness of life at this moment into something sweet and redemptive. We become, as Rilke puts it, the bees of the invisible. With total absorption, we gather the nectar of the invisible into one great honeycomb of the invisible but possible. And that, my friends, is your task as well, not just mine, not just of the poets, if this new agrarianism is to ever take root, if the West is ever to be healed, and if life is ever to flourish again in this place. Thank you.